Hey, Rachel, before we get started, Tom, are you rolling? Do you mind if I mention one thing really quick?
Yeah. For our first April negotiations meeting, most of our agenda tonight will be filled with continuing the IBB process with respect to an issue that the negotiation raised regarding workload and plan time for specials teachers. But we do have one quick thing that we need to address, or we need to take the time that we need to address it, to review and go back and answer some questions about the draft TA that I did regarding the FML exemption to our late resignation provision. And so I don't know if maybe, so just as a reminder, during our last meeting, I had sent maybe like a week and a half before that meeting some draft revisions to that FMLA exemption for everybody to review. And so then at our last meeting, we pretty quickly went through it and we voted and approved it. And then afterward, Amber had some questions and I tried to get those to everyone on the team by like hammering out comments. And then finally, as we were doing the joint statement, I said, whenever I feel like we're rushing, I just say, there's no reason to rush. Like, we don't have to do that. Let's make sure all questions are addressed and everybody knows and understands what the solution is, before we march forward with signing anything. So I was thinking in my car ride to the building today, like the best way to go about it. And so I'm just gonna walk through it and then look to see if anyone says, wait, stop, I'm not following you. Okay, so when we worked on our late resignation provision a couple years ago, one interest that came up was, what do we do about people experiencing medical issues? And if I'm remembering correctly, I don't think we had anything formally in there. Informally, of course, as always, Human Resources and the association and our professional employees were working through that because that happened, but we didn't have anything formally in there. And we saw that other school districts did have some formal language. But the language wasn't really specific. It was just like a medical reason may be a reason to late resign from your contract. And so as I was trying to think through how we capture that and how we figure out whether a medical reason necessitates someone being, resigning and being released from their contract, I went to what are the legal protections in place for employees who have medical issues, because those are processes that we are legally required to follow as a school district. And those two legal processes are Family Medical and Leave Act, everybody's familiar with that, and ADA accommodations, everybody's familiar with that. All employees have to be accommodated under the ADA, whether they started work yesterday or 10 years ago. FML is for employees that have worked a year and are 1250 hours with us. So typically your first year, you're not going to be eligible, or most of your first year, you're not going to be eligible. So what we had thought was, okay, with FML, you have a doctor that certifies that you have a serious health condition. Human Resources reviews and approves that. We talked a lot about impact to the classroom and coworkers when a professional employee is gone. And what we said was, well, if you're already in a spot where you as the employee have said, I need to go to my doctor, my medical condition prevents me from working, you get that certification, it's approved from the district, you're already out for 12 weeks. And if you start that leave, and that's not enough to get you back to work, and what we've decided now is you're a month in, and you're like, I can't come back, it's just not gonna happen for me, then what we're trying to capture in the P&A is a new and additional P&A right that you don't get under any other law, which is that you may resign at the expiration of that job-protected leave. So we need to capture that because that is a new and additional negotiated right. And that also extends to the other FMLA protections. For example, you're taking 12 weeks to care for an immediate family member. Okay, so then we tried to build into that what happens if you're not FML eligible. And as we tested it the first year, what was realized by the administration is that doesn't really work for people who aren't FML eligible because we can't give them those 12 weeks, they're not eligible for it. And really, for those employees, what I want to make sure we're doing as a district to stay legally compliant is that we are steering them toward the ADA process. So even if they're starting out with the mindset, I cannot work, it's our obligation as the employer to say, well, let's talk about it. Let's be creative. What can we do to get you to work and to accommodate you so that you're able to perform your job duties and you're not out of a job? So for all those employees in that situation, I want to make sure that we're at least opening the door and having that ADA conversation, even if it ends up in this mutual place of, well, unfortunately, there is no reasonable accommodation that could be implemented that would allow you to perform your job duties. Okay, so what happens if we get there? I wanted to be really careful with how I drafted the TA because ADA and resignation do not go together legally. ADA is supposed to be the opposite of resignation, right? It's supposed to be like, here's job accommodation so you can stay at your job. But if there was no reasonable job accommodations, then we would be where human resources always is in those situations, which is that they're talking to the employee about a resignation. In that case, I want to make sure we use the longstanding exemption for mutual benefit and we do a separation agreement. It protects the employee because they've resigned and the terms of their resignation are very clear and negotiated, right? So they're going to be looking for what their employment reference is going to be and when their health insurance ends, and they're going to have that all protected and in writing. I like it for the district side too because we eliminate the risk that that employee is going to come back and say, no, you didn't ADA, you didn't follow the ADA, and now I'm going to bring legal claims for failure to accommodate, right? Because in reality, we've tried to and we've worked through that and come to a mutual place where we didn't agree. So that's sort of the paths that I see for that. We had some questions as I put in the draft language, I think they came from John, about don't we already have this? Do we even need to put this in there? So I've thought of a couple ways we could go about this in the event that we're all in agreement about these sort of paths that need to happen when a professional employee has a medical issue. We could leave it how it was written and how we reviewed it our last meeting that sort of directs people to that ADA process if they're not FML eligible. They should be directed there anyway, and human resources and administration should be doing that anyway without that P&A language. So we even secondarily could potentially just take that out and just not have anything about that, and this could really be that additional P&A right for those who are approved for 12 continuous weeks of FML. Or we could add an additional sentence that says, in the event that the district and the employee mutually agree that no reasonable accommodations can be made, then they may discuss this, a resignation pursuant to mutual benefit. Did I lose anyone anywhere in my diatribe? Okay.
No, I would like to see that additional sentence put in, is what I would imagine that I'd like to see.
Yes. As I've thought about this, there's a reason the questions were raised, right? So I think there's benefit to answering them, but also as we have, human resources administrators that continue to get promoted and move on and move up, I want to make sure that the people following them understand and know what the options are. So the more clear it is in that P&A, I think the better. So I'm great with adding that if that's helpful. Okay, I will do that after this meeting, and again, send it as quickly as possible so people can have time to review. Thanks for letting me talk a bunch. And then I think we're really ready to move on to the next agenda item, which is going back to. Yes, and I do think we need to revisit. I shared with Amber following our last meeting that I think from the administration's perspective, there was a little bit of feeling afterward of not understanding the scope of the problem. So specifically, what professional employees are we talking about? What is the scope of the problem? What is the specific nature of it? Because as I was trying to do my work of inviting people to attend the meeting, I had trouble expressing it, which resulted in them experiencing trouble in preparing and not knowing what to prepare. So I just want to make sure we take the time to fully understand the issue.
Okay.
So I think we have, Jill, we'd like to come to the table and explain all that with a presentation.
Sounds good. Yeah, okay. Thank you. I was going to put on the screen just presentation that I put together throughout last summer and this year. Elementary special staff have reached out to me with some concerns, mostly about their schedules, some about traveling, and I met with them again about a week and a half ago to get an even better idea. So, trying to make sure this is as accurate of information as possible, first of all. I put the issue statements, the original one that we had, how do we ensure staff have daily schedule that allows them time to plan, modify lessons, contact parents, collaborate with colleagues, etc., to successfully meet the needs of all students. And then below that was kind of a more narrow focus, which I know you guys like to have. Sorry, I keep saying we. To looking at elementary specials teachers. And so just for people that don't know, maybe for you as well, the general daily schedule of specials, this is not for everyone, just kind of a general one. They have morning supervision. There are 7 sections. They don't teach all 7. They have a plan in there, but there are 7 sections in a day plus a lunch in there. So just kind of a general picture of it. They can teach 6 a day because they have to have a plan. So I just wanted to put that out there. I'll come back to that in a minute. So some of the things that I've heard from traveling elementary specials teachers is around the number of sections that they're assigned. There's not a cap or anything on, I guess the cap would be 6 per day because you can't have more than 6 per day. But other than that, there's not a cap on the number of sections assigned. Their plan time when they do travel, it could be split into 20 to 30-minute increments. That the P&A allows that, but this has just been a concern they've had. Instead of a block of 50 minutes, which is what you would have, when you're in a building the whole time and not traveling. And then just traveling time. Sometimes they travel to another building in the morning. Sometimes they travel in the afternoon. Sometimes they kind of go morning one day, afternoon the next. And just kind of consideration for what that looks like when it's in action. And for this specific traveling elementary specials teachers, it was brought up when the beginning of August, we had 2 elementaries that did not have a music teacher, and they had a long-term substitute. And so wanting to make sure those schools had, a certified music teacher there helping with the music program. We had some elementary music teachers that were then assigned to travel to those buildings and teach the music classes while the long-term sub could watch and help out. And in doing that, their schedule just got, for them, too much. Split plan times. They had a plan time at one building that wasn't their home building, 20 or 30 minutes in the morning. Then their plan time might have been 30 minutes in the afternoon at the other building. It brought up a number of issues, but it wasn't in violation of our agreement. I worked with HR, but because it wasn't a violation, we didn't change anything. They did make effort to hire music staff, and we got at least one. I don't know for sure, I'll have to ask when Pam comes up here. But there's at least one building that got a music teacher at semester, so that kind of relieved that. But because it was still able to happen, because of, we can have a 20-minute chunk of plan time, and that counts, that's why the team brought it. So there's that part. Then elementary specialist teachers that have 24 sections, which is the most you could have, because you can teach 6 per day, and they're on a 4-day rotation. They've come to me with concerns around the workload that they have, and I wanted to kind of compare them to secondary electives. I feel like it's a similar comparison in the sense that they see a new group of kids every 50 minutes, which is similar to what a middle school or high school teacher would see. So an elementary specials teacher that has 24 sections teaches 6 classes a day, secondary elective teaches 5, and then preps and different things. So just kind of wanted to put that out there. You have to prepare for those lessons, clean up after the kids leave, things like that. And it is year after year, they've shared that it's a workload that they find exhausting and difficult to manage day after day. A lot of times these people that have the 24 sections, their building has more than 24 sections, so there's traveling teachers coming over, which can cause other issues of having to share a classroom with another staff member, or different things, because there'd be 2 PE classes going on at the same time, or 2 art classes going on at the same time in an art room, things like that. I guess I don't know if I want to put names on here, but I was looking at special staff or special teachers that are 1.0, but they don't have to travel, and just kind of their number of sections. The STAR just meant that those buildings also have SPED sections, which just means a special education class that comes to their class. So kind of the inequities that they wanted to share was staff that have 24 sections versus staff that have this many sections in their buildings. And I know we're never going to get to a completely equal, but they wanted me to share the difference in the number of sections. As far as like 1.0, we have a few buildings with less than 1.0, and just kind of wanted to look at that as well. I don't know if this is something you guys will discuss, or if this is an HR thing, right? They determine what their FTEs are and all that. But these people are 1.0, and they have 18, 19, 20 sections. And then right now, Lenexa Hills is 0.6, only because they had 14 sections, which was more than half the full 24. I worked with HR and at the beginning of the year, because they were 0.5, and we signed a 1-year MOU to move them up to 0.6, because 14 is more than half of 24. But I'm not sure what that will look like next year. So, yep, and then Westwood View and Tomahawk are both at 0.8. There's a little bit of different things in here, because the Tomahawk librarian goes to Westwood View to fill in, so it's a few other like little things you can't really put in like a table. But just wanted to show the number of sections and the FTE. Not that part. Just some district-wide things. Just sharing that it used to be, before we went to a 4-day rotation, we had a 5-day rotation. In that 5-day rotation, they taught 5 classes a day, so they had 25 classes per week. No suggestions of changing a 4-day rotation, just wanted to share that. Now, they could possibly teach 6 classes a day, so 30 classes in a week. Different number, preps from kindergarten to 6th grade, different SPED section. It feels like an additional prep, because you have to do something different with those students. If you're traveling, when you go to another building, you typically teach what that other teacher is teaching in the home building. Like, if you pick up one of the second grades and the other teacher has the other second grades, you want them all to do the same thing. So we don't have one second grade doing a different lesson than all the other second grades. So typically, when you travel to that new building, it could be a different lesson than what you were doing at your home building. They wanted to share that sometimes substitutes, when they pick up a job, if they find out they're traveling, they'll choose not to travel to the second school. So that's been an issue because there have been times when the teacher who is in the building and waiting for the traveling teacher to come over, they have felt kind of the pressure to go ahead and just teach that class during their plan time, get paid for it, but they felt the pressure to teach it because that substitute wasn't coming over. They chose not to travel to their second school. I have a question about that, but that's for you guys. And sometimes substitutes will just choose to cancel a job when they find out they have to travel. They don't want to have to travel between buildings during the day, and they might not know ahead of time. Traveling teachers do sometimes feel that they need to attend night events at both schools. I mean, that's something you can work out with your principals for sure, but it does, I think they feel like they should because they want to be connected to the families, to the kids, to the employees in those other buildings. And then there's some just additional responsibilities for the specials teachers, like librarian has to manage the library. So shelving books, ordering books. There's a lot of things that go into managing a library. I'm not doing a great job of explaining it, but there is a large amount of work in that. Art teachers put on art shows throughout the year. They submit artwork for a lot of different things. Music staff get ready for all the concerts that they put on with their elementary kids. PE does, at least at the end of the year, I know that they probably organize the whole field day. I'm sure there's other things as well. So that was just kind of to share that having 24 sections feels like an exhausting schedule for them to teach 6 classes per day. And yeah, I think that's the end of that. Whoops. One other thing I just wanted to share. I tried to put this together. Ms. Pam Lewis sent me a schedule, which thank you for that. And I tried to this was from last year, or this is this current year. But there were this looks kind of crazy, so you don't have to look at all of it. But just one thing I wanted to ask and see and then, maybe you guys can discuss this. There were some buildings where they had, let's say 3 SPED sections that were combined into 2 special sections. So like you have 3 separate classrooms of SPED students, but when you bring them to specials, you combine them into 2 classes. Asking about that because we do have language that says you can't do that. So I was curious if you guys want to talk more information about that. Yeah, sure. So Ms. Smith, 3 teachers, Teacher A, Teacher B, Teacher C, they each have their own class of special education students. But when they go to their art class, they split them into 2. So instead of keeping them 3 separate classes, they'll combine them into 2 separate classes for their specials. I'm not sure, but I'm assuming they're in 3 different classes for a reason, with special education. And they
What
usually have
language in the
pairs
P&A
and
are
such.
you referencing, just so we can all look at it?
It would be,
Rachel, we would need to double check, but I'm pretty sure the classes are much smaller than a regular class.
yes, they are.
That's what I would assume too, is we're talking about a handful.
Yes, thank you. And that's what I was trying to say, is that they are definitely much smaller. I just wanted to ask about, what if there were short-staffed that day with paras, and does it ever cause any concerns with that? And then just one other thing was I know we worked really hard with some schools to get new kindergarten teachers at the semester, but in doing so, it added another section to that class, or to that school, but we didn't add another special schedule, per section. So just kind of looking at that, because, let's see if I can find the page.
Oh, gosh. So then when that kindergarten teacher was added at semester,
The
there'd be a
three-
new class, there's a whole new class added, so they split a kindergarten class.
into
Or
the other
multiple
two.
classes,
Mhm,
okay.
For the specials. Let me see, let's look at the word combined.
I know we added somebody at semester and we had a separate section. Is
Thank
that
you.
some of the other?
So it's not yours.
Nope, not
No.
mine.
Let me think if I can find it. It would be in like elementary specials. Oh, no, it was Crestview. No, it's not Russian. Here we go. Page 47. Yes, sorry. I know. Teachers of art, library, physical education, music shall not be required to teach more than 6. We already talked about that. And shall not be required to teach classes which consist of students from more than one homeroom. Yeah. Elementary teachers of art, library, physical education, and music. Curriculum shall not be required to teach more than the equivalent of 6 class periods per day, which that's been, we know that, and, yeah. And shall not be required to teach classes which consist of students from more than one homeroom.
Any idea of the history of that section? Or
Yes,
the-
we put it in 2017.
Okay.
Because, well, we put in the 6 periods because when we went to ABCD, to try to make things work, we had at least 1 or 2 teachers that taught 7 classes in a day, so they had a day without a plan time. So we changed it to 6, so they could still have a plan time. And then when you take 3 classes of 20 each and split it into 2 classes of 30, it increases the number of kids in your room. You now have a class of 30 instead of a class of 20. I think their rosters in the Skyward would still have separate homerooms. You know what I mean? I just think it was something that was needed, was necessary to
So
not
that's,
combine.
Miss Smith and Miss Jones, both of them can't send their students to specials at the same time.
Right.
Okay.
In the same classroom. One
In the
might send to
same-
art, and one
right.
might send to music.
They
but
can't
yeah.
go to the same classroom.
So just kind of looking into that, I literally only found out or only heard from those special teachers about this a week and a half ago.
Yep.
So,
Well, we, of course, have a requirement to allow sped students to access those specials with their grade level peers. And so just thinking about how we meet that,
Sure.
federal
Yeah.
legal requirement while we, also take into consideration size to the extent we can, again, class sizes.
right. Well, I'm sure those SLC classrooms have a certain number of students and a certain number of, a teacher and para because of things in their,
It's going to be exceptionalities
yeah.
based on what exceptionalities.
So I think maybe that was another reason why we put in here not to combine into one class from
Do you
two
think that's
homerooms.
specifically considered special education students?
I'm not sure. I know the person I can reach out
Yeah.
to because it was Lauren Ingram that was here. She's not here anymore, but
Okay.
anyway, she was on our negotiating team and she was an art teacher but
I just don't, and I don't know, we'd have to do some research even if we can do
I would
that
wanna-
and still be
yeah.
compliant
Sure.
with sped law.
Oh.
And maybe we can, I just would be, that's a concern I would have.
yeah, absolutely.
Do we know why some buildings at semester chose to, or why, after adding a kindergarten teacher, some buildings changed their schedule and others did not?
Well, the building that I heard from was Crestview, and they were already traveling to Oak Park Carpenter, so they had 19 sections, and they were traveling to Oak Park Carpenter to pick up some there, because Oak Park Carpenter has more than 24. So I think when they got a new kindergarten section and a new 6th grade section, they actually got both that semester. Trying to make the schedule work was not. But I mean, I didn't know, and I don't know that the special teachers maybe knew that taking 3 kindergartens into 2 classes or taking 3 6th grades into 2 classes was technically a violation of the agreement.
Christy, when you added a kindergarten teacher, did you have conversations with your specialist teachers about the schedule?
Yes, I asked them, would they rather a split? I don't remember why, but anyways, if we would rather them split or have 3 separate sections, and we were small enough, we could do
Right.
the 3.
And I know, Chris, you had that conversation as well, but I guess, can you just ask a teacher, like, are you okay splitting classes when it's laid out in here?
Against the language.
That was just my,
I mean, I would want us to have an agreement, you know,
Right, sure.
before we would do something like that, but
and they did talk with the Crestview staff. I just, yeah.
Yep. So what is your alternative? That, we're saying the options that are presented is like, hey, we can make sure everybody gets their specials time by doing one of two. What are the choices? Either you do agree to combine 2 different grade levels in a class, or,
Not 2 different grade levels, so we went from 2 sections of kindergarten to 3. So the third
Okay.
section, you would split between the 2.
got it. So then we would have there are situations where we've had 2 entire homerooms coming into the same specials class.
Well, it would be like 1.5.
Like half and half.
1.5.
Yeah.
But that's still,
But yeah, it was a unique situation for sure, and I don't know what the solution would have been then.
Okay.
I just thought it was something that
yeah.
should be looked at and problem solved around. I don't know.
And then going back to the issue of the special education students, their homeroom is going to be their general education classroom. Do you know if we've got,
No, they have their own,
If it's SLC, they're.
It's separate.
They're, not, I don't want to use self-contained, or, they're separate as it is, except for when it comes to.
I believe that they're still enrolled
they
within
still have an
their-
assigned, they should still have an
Yes, they still have
assigned.
assigned general education classroom.
And that's how they access those specials with their grade level peers, is they determine what their homeroom is. And I just want to clarify that for, again, do we have them coming from different assigned homerooms?
Right.
Or not?
okay. Yeah, I guess I didn't realize that a student in the SLC classroom with their SLC teacher, their sped teacher, also was assigned a gen ed classroom teacher.
And it's so that they can access those sorts of things with their grade level peers.
And the level of access is different, of
Sure.
course, according to the child, but yeah,
Right.
of course.
Okay.
Okay.
So anyway. I think, yeah, that's kind of what I have, but I put this in your folder.
Thank you.
How do we ensure elementary specials teachers have a daily schedule that allows them time to plan, modify lessons, contact parents, collaborate with colleagues, et cetera, successfully meet the needs of all students?
Because I feel like when we framed and focused this the first time, the issue statement I tied was, how do you provide more structure and support for the traveling teachers?
Yes, so it's traveling is one part of it, and how their plan time can get split depending on how many sections they have.
It's much more comprehensive and probably more
Sure.
complicated than when we first framed and focused it. I feel like we've gotten more information. And I think that as we process this, we need to think about, there are different solutions for different pieces of it.
Sure.
Yeah,
I think, but they're all interrelated. It's kind of complicated. And I also had another question, just so I'm clear that I understand. No special teacher, whether traveling or not, does more than 6 sections, right?
A day.
In a plan.
A day, yeah. So over 4 days, because it's a 4-day rotation, but because they're going to see all the students in their building, they would do 24, we call them sections, but they're classrooms,
Classes.
Yeah.
Okay.
What questions did other folks have for Jill or for anyone who's this person? Or what thoughts are popping out to you?
and it's okay if we don't know this, that's fine. But like, so when you guys got that extra section, you guys got that extra section, right? Okay, so when you guys got that extra section and you split and those teachers got however many more kids, are they getting any more support with any of that?
We
Or are they just
didn't,
getting
we
it?
didn't split ours.
You guys didn't split yours,
No.
okay. So I guess that would be my question, is for the schools that got the extra section and then they split them, was there any additional support given to the teacher with just getting extra students?
They shared that, that was discussed, like their building principal said, if we split these 3 kindergartens into 2 classes for you, we will provide you with an aide or some kind of support. I don't know if it was an aide, but they shared with me that that support has not been either there or not consistent, so I think that's why they brought it up to me a week and a half ago when we met.
Okay.
So this issue is specific to all elementary specials teachers who teach all 4 of the elementary specials. And it is a workload plan time issue, whether traveling or not.
Yeah, and that can ebb and flow. I mean, the number of sections you guys know changes year to year. So one year you might not be traveling, the next
Okay.
year you might be. Or you could be in a large building and each year you have, the full load, 6 classes a day,
Yep.
yeah, 24 sections.
Okay.
If someone teaches 24 sections, they get 50 minutes of plan time a day
Exactly, yes.
and 25-minute duty-free lunch.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay.
And when you all talked about framing and focusing the issue statement last time, you spent more time focusing on the issues that traveling teachers may have on breaking up their plan time in terms of using it, makes it less effective. And I think my notes also say, and I've been sharing that, you guys talked about traveling teachers getting out of the building on time, sometimes eats into either luncheon or plan time. So it sounds like, other than the way you just sort of represented it, Rachel, it sounds like there are then also issues that are special to travel teachers, right? Then it almost feels like you have to deal with the whole issue statement, and then secondary, depending on how you deal with that for all specials, then what are the remaining issues for traveling special teachers?
Oh, your mic.
Thank you. Just go.
It's like creeping up. Sorry.
Thanks, Tom. So Dr. Higgins just said, and I think this makes sense to me, that if you are a elementary specials teacher and you are assigned 6 sections per day, that's going to mean your plan time is not split because
Yes.
that 7th is your plan time. So
So-
who are we talking about who then could potentially have smaller increments?
A traveling elementary
traveling.
specials teacher.
Because of that 30-minute travel time built in? Because there's no way to,
Yeah. It doesn't always
if
happen.
there's no way to make their schedule neat with the sections then,
Right.
because we have these 30-minute blocks intermixed with,
Maybe. I would say it's dependent upon the schedule.
okay.
Yeah.
Some people may get their full plan period at a certain building, and some may not.
Yeah.
It depends
Right.
on where they're traveling, what the schedules look like at those 2 buildings. I would say some situations it work, and some situations it probably doesn't. I think Pam would probably be a more representative person to speak on that. She probably has them all memorized and can rattle them off in no time.
Well, yeah, and that's why we brought this to Pam and Dr. Schumacher, when unfortunately there was, music staff that were traveling to those 2 buildings that had long-term subs. And I understand that was something that we did so we could make sure those students had a certified music teacher, teaching there. But in doing so, it created a split plan time. And it was difficult to say the least. Unfortunately, the music teacher wasn't able to have choir at their building because they traveled in the AM, but also in the PM on like a different day. And so they were never able to have like a set day of the week for choir. They had their plan time a lot of the time in the other building and not their home building, so it was really difficult to do planning that way. And because it all fell into the language of the P&A, there was nothing necessarily that was, grievable. But it just really felt like not ideal. It was exhausting. They were very happy when you guys were able to hire a music teacher for that building, and they didn't travel there anymore.
So since they are not traveling anymore, that makes me think that person is less than they're at a less than 24 section building, is that correct?
Yes.
So since they're no longer traveling, what are they doing in support of their home building?
I'm not sure.
Because if people are 1.0 and it's less than 24, then they are doing something
Yeah.
at their home building,
Absolutely.
correct?
Yes.
I know typically that something is pushing in for intervention groups and supporting those kids that need a tier 2 or tier 3 intervention.
Gotcha.
Right.
That's, just to make sure I understand, because sometimes I'm speaking this in, that's an important clarification because no one has holes in their schedule. So when you're comparing to your similar elementary special peer, there's not a person who has holes in their schedule. They're being utilized not on their plan time.
I don't know that that's the case. I think that there might be some buildings where the staff aren't assigned something for every one of their off sections.
They should be.
I was going to say,
Right.
is that
That's an administrative
Should keep it
issue,
there.
and they should be.
Okay.
So on your slide where it talked about the less than 24 section buildings
please.
that had a 1.0 teacher, they should, if they're not traveling, they should be supporting
In
that
other
building.
ways.
In other ways, in that building.
Right.
They don't have, they're not kicking their feet up. They shouldn't be, and having holes in their schedule.
Right,
as
and I
Rachel
apologize
said.
if that's the way it looked. I was
No,
not
no,
trying to
it-
say that.
It did not appear that way to me. I
Okay.
was just, when he raised that point, I was like, okay, why is Dr. Higgins saying that? And then I just want to make sure I
I think
understood.
there might be other things that when you have less than 24 sections, yes, you're doing something during those times when you don't have an art class or a music class. And sometimes that might be, like you said, an intervention, a push-in. Could be other things that you're helping out in the building. I would say some, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't generalize things, but I think that some staff would prefer that. Some would not. Some would like to just teach their subject and not push in, so.
And depending on what it is, I'm trying to make sure I clarify this comment well enough. The interventions, typically there's not as much prep involved as there is if you're teaching your art, your music, your library, your PE classes. An elementary intervention, typically there is some training involved to get used to the intervention, and then the materials typically, again, I'm sure there's exceptions out there, are prepared.
Which would be a good thing, so.
Yeah.
Yes,
the
yes,
teacher's
that's what I'm
not
saying,
doing-
that's a good thing.
And I wanted to clarify that as well. That's good. We don't want those teachers doing additional prep for that intervention period.
Okay, so then I need to ask another clarifying question. Totally follow what you're saying with that. So in terms of number of class preps, if I'm at like 19 or 20 or something like that, am I still likely having to prep for K through 6?
Yes.
Even though-
Yes.
Okay, so actual like prep for kindergarten music, first grade music, second grade music, I'm probably still doing that even if I'm one of those that has fewer sections.
Correct.
But I don't have to actually, like if I'm an art teacher, that's one less time a day I might have to get all the materials out and.
Yes, exactly.
Yes,
Thank you.
given you're still going to, the one thing that I'm kind of struggling with that too is you're still prepping for that kindergarten lesson for all those sections.
Okay.
I'm not sure if that's very clear how I'm
Yep.
phrasing
No,
that.
no, I'm totally, you still have to plan and prepare, but the implementation
You're still planning and
of it-
preparing the
okay.
same amount.
You would have less students.
Right. There'd be less students, so the actual physical preparing would be less. But the written lesson plans, coming up with the ideas is the same.
Got it. And I totally understand, Jill, why some people might enjoy it and some people may be like, no, I just want to teach music all day long. Sure. Okay.
Right, and part of where I'm going there is, I don't believe there should be an extra prep for any of that. I want to make sure there's not any additional prep for what they're doing beyond the library of music PE curriculums.
So I just want to do a quick check-in and reminder, and I know we have more folks here in sort of watching than we normally do. I don't know how many people watch online. I don't know that we look at that. But so guys, I am a head shaker. When I hear you guys say something, I go like this because I hear you. I'm comprehending what you're saying. But so for folks who don't know, I am neutral. My role here is really just to get folks talking and have conversation about the problem that can lead you to a solution. So I know I shake my head a lot. For folks who've not been in here before, it doesn't mean I agree with anybody. It just means I hear you. And I think that also it's worth saying that, you know, part of the IBB process is to ask a lot of questions and seek to understand. So don't read a lot into that. If we weren't asking lots of questions at the table, it would be a broken process. So the questions really are just seeking to understand. They're not to editorialize or to take a position. We are still in understand mode. So But I want to take a moment and say, we're going to have to decide how we process this. Sort of the more comprehensive issue statement that was on the board in the first screen deals with more issues than the more narrowly focused issue we started to unpack around the issues with traveling teachers. I feel like the interest very much overlap, but there may be more interest here with this more comprehensive issue statement. And I'm just thinking, does anyone have any thoughts about sort of how we process this? Does it make sense for us to try to tackle the comprehensive issue statement and then say, what about the way you solve the comprehensive issue statement? What about that solution does not solve the traveling problems? And then take on those traveler problems that don't get solved under this bigger sort of question. That's one way to do it. And when I think about this big question, I'm thinking about what pieces do we bite off and how? I want to know if you all have any thoughts on it, just process-wise.
So one of the reasons why we have Pam Lewis here is because I don't have any understanding of what is feasible from an administrative scheduling standpoint. And so I feel like I need to understand how that schedule is done, what our boundaries are, what's capable, what's not capable, what next year looks like. Because I don't want to come up with a solution that then makes scheduling elementary specials impossible. So we may need to hear.
Yeah, I was going to say,
before-
is Pam prepared to share tonight? I didn't know if we ask her as a guest or just.
I didn't really know what our exact questions were, but I definitely can come to the table and try to answer as many questions as I can based on
Yep.
our practice.
Yep.
I'm out, you're in.
Thank you, Jill.
And it may be, and please, like, let me know comfort level and IBB process-wise, that if we are in a discussion about solutions, that we need some input on feasibility, workability, all of that stuff from Pam.
Yeah, I mean, I think like we've done other things, subject matter expert engaged
Yes.
to support the team. Pam, as you listened, were you here when Jill started?
Yes,
Oh, okay.
I was taking some notes back
Okay,
there.
good. I was going to say, you probably got a lot
I'm
going
gonna
on.
get called up here. Is this on?
If it's green, it's on.
There we go.
You got it.
I said, yes, I was taking some notes because I thought I might get called up here, so. And nice job, Nolan, on your part about the intervention. Yeah, good job on that. I was nodding in agreement, actually, so. So I don't know if you want me to just, if you guys want to ask specific questions that you have, or do you want me to try to answer some of the questions that were asked? Like I said, I was taking notes, but I don't know specifically if there's something you want to start with asking.
Maybe like, what does next year look like? Can we
Yeah.
start there?
Good question. So right now, I'm excited to say we are fully staffed with our elementary music for right now. We did run into some struggles. I mean, Jill's accurate. Last year was a unique situation for elementary music, for sure. We had a later June resignation and a July resignation that put us in a pretty tough spot. You know, working with Bill Thomas to try to do some recruitment around that, finding out, you know, obviously kind of what we're hearing about different things, a little bit of a shortage with music candidates, especially that late in the year. So we did work really hard to, as Jill said, be able to fill one of those that semester with one of our student teachers, which that alleviated a lot. But then we still had the one position, we just didn't have the candidate to fill that. So, but this year, we're fully staffed for next year, so we're really excited about that. So last year was a unique situation. We don't typically have that many different staff members supporting other schools. And when we were working to problem solve that, our priority was that students had instruction and support from a certified music teacher. We wanted the students to have that, so that's why we had teachers come over that had sections in their schedule to teach, but also then, while teaching, be able to model that for the substitute, who would then be teaching the other sections. So that was the model that we used to kind of fill that gap. So we're kind of back to the typical of supporting schools that are more than 24 sections. So for next year, sorry, I'm going to need to glance at my spreadsheet.
So that means one elementary school has more than 24 sections, so someone else needs to come in.
Right.
Okay.
So, for example, if a school has 27 sections, then they would have support to teach those 3 sections, because we would want to make sure that they didn't teach more than 24 sections, because we want them to have their allotted plan time. So those are the situations where we add support.
Amber, I think you've been trying to get a question.
Yes, I have a question. So for schools like Rose Hill and Neiman that normally sometimes add a section in December, do you plan for that when you're staffing? Because they're going to be adding a section.
We don't really add a lot during the mid-year, not typically. Usually it's more classroom sections, but when we do add a classroom section, we have to look at, do we have the allotted specials time? And so you have to look at, number one, how many sections you have. Most of our schools that do travel, they're 16-section schools. We have a couple schools that are 14-section schools. Schools that are more like an 18 or 19-section school, they're usually just supporting one section. So we really look at that when we talk through and select what schools are going to support. It's those that have quite a bit of time in their schedule. Again, that adjusted a little bit this year because of the situation we were in. We were having to, again, provide more support to schools. So yes, we do plan for that. We adjust for that. I think Crestview was brought up as an example mid-year. And so what we did with the mid-year with some of our schools that were supporting, and then they added sections, if we were going to go ahead and add those sections into their special schedule, we could do that. That would really change the schedule of intervention and change a lot of different dynamics of their master schedule, which could definitely be done. It was also, we really gave the choice to the specials teachers. That being said, because if they went ahead and added that section, it was going to change their schedules, and they were also going to be teaching that extra hour. So it was either, we let them choose, since it was mid-year, and was going to either really disrupt the schedule, or they could keep that extra really planning time because we didn't make the adjustment. And
That was what I was asking.
and we
what's
gave
the
that,
choice?
we gave that choice to
So
them.
they're saying, okay, either fill that section block,
Mm-hmm.
or I'd rather just have a slightly larger, or a time and a half, I should say, larger.
Well, they were already used to having those kids in the same class. And then it is accurate that extra support, the plan was extra support.
So
to be
they're
provided.
essentially agreeing to a P&A variance because it makes a better schedule for them. But then are they required to do intervention during that?
No, they wouldn't have had any
Time.
extra time, no.
So when you're saying, because you said it was planned, that wasn't a planned time, that was when they were supporting intervention?
Well, they would have had that, they wouldn't have been doing intervention.
Okay,
Yeah, so, yeah, we have to make sure that everybody gets their plan time.
yes, just
But it
double
was,
checking
yeah,
on
it was the
that.
choice of the school because it was mid-year and the unique situation we were in.
Okay,
And I did not have anybody reach out to me and say we weren't getting extra support during the school year or any need to adjust.
Okay.
Okay, second question. Is there a solution for Lenexa Hills for next year so that they are not .6?
Repeat that, I'm sorry.
Is there, have you come up with a solution? Because right now Lenexa Hills is at .6.
They will be .5 next year, and then we have Broken Arrow supporting one section, which we have done in the past.
How many specials teachers did travel last year?
I'd have to go back and check. Yeah, I could look that up for you.
Like currently this year?
Yeah, just ballpark, just curious to know.
I believe it's 42.
Oh, okay.
That includes band, art, PE, librarian, and interventionist.
Across all grade levels?
I believe that's elementary only, but some of those, that includes traveling to secondary schools as well.
And do you happen to have the total number of specials teachers?
Nope.
But that also includes interventionists, correct, and specials
Okay.
teachers, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's just in general who all travels within the district.
Correct.
I can kind of expand on that too for the coming year. We did add additional interventionists and additional ELL staff. And so the priority with that was also then to match up those ELL and interventionists in a position, or we gave teachers choice if you were split between two schools and your schools were adding that added FTE, they chose which school they wanted to be at full-time. So we have a lot fewer interventionists being split than we did last year because of the added FTE, as well as ELL, because of the added FTE to ELL and interventionists for the coming year.
And out of that number, are the majority specials or the majority interventionists?
There's 6 innovation specialists. So there's 10 band teachers that travel, 7 art, 6 PE, 6 librarian, 6 innovation specialists. I don't think that adds up to 42, because then there's some of our career and tech ed teachers at the secondary level here at the CAA that I believe travel as well.
And are interventionists bargaining unit employees, just as we problem solve, just, okay.
Yeah.
Nolan, were you going to jump in? Go ahead.
Yes. So when you're building that schedule of traveling specialists and where they have to go, what thought process is put into the proximity of the schools to each other?
Yeah, that's a priority. So we have to balance looking at number of sections that the school has, so the extra time that's allotted in that schedule and the FTE of the staff member, and then we also look at location as
Okay.
well. I mean, we really try the best we can to really focus on both of those, but also, like, again, looking at the number of sections
Right.
is primary, of course,
Okay.
just because some of our schools are so much smaller.
Right.
Okay, I have a question that's just, I don't know that we'll have like a direct answer to, but I know in this team group a lot, we talk about, you know, competitiveness and wanting Shawnee Mission to be an attractive place for professional employees to work. So, do we know, like, how Olathe, how Blue Valley, how, like, is this, I mean, is this something that school districts have to do at the elementary level? Is this unique or somewhat unique to Shawnee Mission? Is this, hey, I'm an elementary art teacher, so I have to expect that this part of the job out there, or not?
Question.
Yeah, I really can't speak for other districts. I don't want to,
Okay, I don't know
speak for
either.
something I haven't studied a lot. I've talked to a few people that used to be principals in other districts. They didn't seem to, I mean, they talk a lot about it being same kind of situations, but I'm not going to speak to it because I haven't really thoroughly looked at that, so.
Has anyone worked in a different district that
Yeah, I'm
had?
curious to know what experience there is out there.
And I don't know if it's a size of district issue, you know, like, I have no idea. Just, you know, I'm not surprised that we don't know about that, but I'm just wondering if that's just kind of part of the job, or if it's unique to us. Because as we think of solutions, my question is, have our neighboring districts thought of a better way to do it, that we could rely on them? Or is it a challenge that all of our comparative districts are facing?
Well, I know that in Olathe, they have 5 sections, they have 5 different specials. So I think that they obviously would have a lowercase load, I would feel like, because they have the 5 days spread out instead of having to do that 5th day of plan. Do you kind of get what I mean?
I actually was just talking to Olathe's general counsel about this at a conference that we were at, and this was fascinating to me, but he said that their specials teachers have to teach typewriting.
Like on a typewriter?
This is what he
Keyboard?
said.
Or like maybe
Keyboarding,
speaking.
sorry.
I'm
Oh my God.
keyboarding, but I feel like that's classified staff
Go
that
ahead and date
teaches
myself.
that.
Mavis
I
can.
think that's what he's, I think he
I
said
don't
to
think
get
they
to fifth
do, because they
section.
had classified staff doing that when I worked
Oh,
there.
that's it. They have classified
And then they
staff doing
also
that as
have
their fifth
counselors
section.
as well. They have
Yes.
so once a
They
week.
have that as their 5th section. Yes, that's right. Sorry. They have it as
Yeah.
their 5th section.
And then they also get
Yeah.
a counselor for 30 minutes once a
Yes.
week.
Yes.
So they do have some additional time.
Yes.
But they are also K-5. which I
Yes, they're
understand.
also K-5.
We're one of the only districts that have 6th grade in the elementary as opposed to middle school.
And how does that put a challenge on this
It's additional sections of
special
Yes.
special.
schedule because of the additional sections? Okay.
Interesting. You guys, we're a little, I don't want to take us all over in the process, because I don't know that we're ready to brainstorm the big sort of comprehensive issue statement that we had on the board. But while we do have a subject matter expert in the room and others, I wonder if, not that we're going to make decisions
I don't think we're there, because I think we do have to answer that process question, what do we want to decide on first and how? But while we've got folks in the room that spend time thinking about this, does it make sense for me to just go through the initial brainstorm solutions you had around the traveling specialist teacher? Just to go through them, not to pick them apart, just to hear if there's a reaction or if it's something that's been tried, or just to remind you of where you were starting to go with this when you were just focusing on the traveling issues. Is it okay that I read those? But I don't think we're ready to look for consensus on any of those, just get impact. And remember, when we brainstorm solutions, we just kind of throw everything out there. We may have some bad ideas in here, but what we say is it may lead to a good idea. So the first one we had was limit the number of sections for travel teachers. And then in parentheses, I wrote or comp. I don't know why I did that, but limit number of sections.
I can clarify the comp. So
Yeah.
if they are going above that number of sections that we would cap, then there would be compensation involved, similar to what we do with secondary if they're teaching 6.
We also had, and again, I feel like maybe Pam's tried to play with some of this stuff, I don't know, alter the minimum number of minutes. If anybody could shed light on what that was. Was it minimum number of plan minutes? I don't know
I
what
think that had to do with the scheduled travel time
Oh, yeah.
and more accurately coming up with like a formula.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that might relate to this. Create actual travel time. In other words, instead of just putting in that block, what is the actual travel time? Then you had the idea of, could travelers be limited to feeder travel only? Then you had limit number of buildings they could travel to, maybe unintended consequences. You had pair plan and travel time together. And then parentheses, you had building choice. And then you had hire more travel teachers. And then you had admin and association work together with teachers for individualized solutions where these issues are coming up, which I think you said that there have been examples where folks have connected with their admin, with Pam and the teacher, and they've figured out individual solutions. But those were the things you all were looking at when we just said, hey, throw some things on the wall. So I don't know if tonight there's a reaction to any of those or more information that could be provided on those.
I would say another solution could be
It's on.
It's on. If a teacher's having to travel, have it be at the beginning of the day or the end of the day instead of the middle of the day.
That is what we do for the specials. Yeah, we work it
Oh,
at the
do you?
beginning or the end. Yeah, so they start their day or end their day there.
And then we sort of left at that, and we said, hey, we need to have the special coordinator or coordinators weigh in, and then a report from Jill. That's where we left it last time. So this is really just to give you a sense of where we're picking up. Some of the interest that you all had in solving this problem, in other words, the why do we need to work together to solve it, teacher satisfaction and morale, retention and recruitment in these positions, class offerings for students, efficiency and momentum for a teacher and their schedule, appropriate building coverage, that was important for safety, intervention, student academics. Teacher relationships and connections matter, equity, and under equity, after Jill presented, I kind of gave it 2 sub-bullet points, which was traveler teachers versus middle school load, and then non-traveling specials teachers compared to traveling specials teachers in terms of the equity point. Another interest on why we need to solve it is to be fiscally responsible and to solve it in a sustainable way. You also wanted to make sure you met P&A requirements. Doesn't mean you don't mutually agree to adjust them, but as they're written now, you need either follow or adjust. Honor administration's obligation to a schedule that meets student needs. And then we also said an interest is kind of a no-brainer that, a teacher having effective plan time means better student outcomes. And I don't know if there are other interests that have cropped up since we've had Jill's presentation or heard from Pam. I think those kind of interests kind of nail it. So when we go to solve, we want to say we want a solution or solutions
Can we
that.
offer a solution, a possible solution be, did we have it on there, do we have capping the number of sections for traveling teachers?
Limit the number.
Okay.
So we
Double
want to
check.
make sure our solutions meet most of those interests if
Right.
possible and not harm any. Don't make anything worse, right? What'd you have? What were you thinking?
I don't think anything other than, not in terms of solutions or a lot of other things. Blue Valley and Olathe, their elementary special teachers do travel if needed. So I checked with both Blue Valley and Olathe. They have specials teachers who travel if needed.
Turner School District does as well.
Turner and Blue Valley and Olathe, travel as needed. It might be interesting to see what kind of perimeters they have or how they support that.
I was just going to add, I just quickly kind of counted, so I don't want to have this be written as it is 100% accurate, so let me just state that. But it looks as if, when I tried to quickly review, we had 11 traveling specials teachers, just elementary specials, and that next year we'd be back down to 6 schools.
okay. Wow.
So I want to double check that, but I did know we were back to what we typically would have, and last year was definitely a more challenging year for us as far as meeting the needs with specials.
So the larger issue statement that was on Jill's screen, I felt like dealt a lot more with workload versus the negative nuances of travel. So the question is, do you want to take that on as an issue statement, work through that, then move on to the traveler issues separately, knowing they're related? And if you want to take those on, tonight, do we want to go ahead and try to dig into that? Is it something where you want a smaller group to take a look and come back? You've committed some things for the purposes of efficiency and having sort of the right heads in it. How do you want to go? Keep it all here, or?
I mean, I don't have a preference other than we have one more meeting
Oh, sorry.
left. And
Yeah.
so it may be, well, sorry, one more non-compensation meeting left. And so, and we have 45 minutes left today. So I don't know if it's something where we want to try and do some work today and then see if a small group can't meet with Pam or something like that to come up with a solution. I don't want to feel rushed. I know
I'm
we
feeling right.
have this CC that says like, hey, we're going to get through what we can and then we're going to stop. My concern with that is always that now we've introduced all these issues, but we don't have a solution. And I don't want that feeling to be left either. So, I don't know. I feel like there's a lot of ins and outs that I'm just, I don't want to do anything that messes up our ability to be efficient and appropriate and create unwanted outcomes, because we could do something that then creates a lot of harm. We can't keep people at 1.0. I don't want to do anything like that.
My question is regarding ESSER money with class sizes, because I know we have additional teachers to keep class sizes low. How much of this is going to change when that ESSER money is no longer there and the class size cap goes up? Like, will we lose sections in buildings, or have they stayed pretty much the same as what we had before the ESSER money?
Well, we've planned classes this year to continue with those guidelines without ESSER funds.
And that'll be I don't think Russ has presented that yet. I think that's the next board meeting.
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure either.
But our staffing planning, that's what
Our
we
staffing
utilized.
planning uses the COVID time classroom size guidelines.
Without the
And-
money.
With no plan of increasing that at this time?
For next school year, no.
No, okay.
In terms of the scheduling too, I mean, if we need to add more dates to feel confident, whether that be over the summer, whether that be at this school year, I think I speak for NEA-Shawnee Mission when I say we're happy to do that.
So this is what I think, based on just pulling together while we were waiting, a couple of us kind of looked at what else is on our plate. So this is the issue of plan time for specials, or really specials workload, and then traveling teachers. But we also had we have the manageable SPED workload. Isn't manageable SPED workload an issue statement this year that we're revisiting the MOU?
Yes.
Give me some feedback. So that's going to require some time. If we don't get to today, it's going to have time on our next agenda.
Yes.
Late resignation sounds like it's done. Is there a calendar committee report coming back here? And if so, will there need to be any action on it? Or is that just kind of an FYI? Not going to take not a lot of time.
That's a Jill thing?
Do we need time on the agenda for that?
I was just going to share that I worked with Dr. Dennis, Dr. Hubbard. Dr. Dennis does the calendar, and next year, second semester, parent-teacher conference day will be both elementary and secondary staff will have a full day of elementary both elementary and secondary staff will have a full day of parent-teacher conferences in second semester. That's been on our calendar, but I wondered, they brought it up because that might, if they wanted to memorialize that in the agreement. So, anyway, it doesn't change student minutes because a parent-teacher contact day counts as a full day of student minutes.
And that was really our calendar,
Yeah.
was that one
That's-
concern?
Yep.
which we
Okay.
have it in next year's calendar.
Is that you want elementary and secondary, there's an interest
Yes, there is. Yes, there is.
What-
in having, for both elementary and secondary, a full day for parent-teacher conferences second semester.
Yes.
That is not currently hard-coded into the PNA.
And it's really, when we only have the 3-hour night conference, we kind of limit the number of parents that we can see.
Yeah,
So having that full day would definitely increase the
okay.
number of minutes that we can meet with parents and meet with students, just like we
Because
do
we
in the
do
fall.
have that first semester.
Correct.
Yes,
Is that hard-coded in the PNA?
yes.
I believe so.
Okay, I've seen that as a parent, because
Yeah.
I do them first semester, and then
you're
the
like,
communication that I get second semester is, if you want to come in,
Yeah,
because there's not enough time.
there's,
Okay. I need to potentially do some research on that, because this is the first I'm hearing about that, but certainly, we could do the full IBB on that next meeting.
And it sounds like your issue statement is like, how do we spend more time with parents, and a solution would be.
Have sufficient time for
'Cause it
parent-teacher
doesn't change-
conferences, both semesters.
It doesn't change student minutes because conferences count as full minutes.
So then, other than that, it leaves us the specials workload and traveling special teacher issues, and it leaves us sped workload, which we hadn't started to unpack this year, although it's sort of work in progress with the MOU.
Yes.
And we have an hour left tonight, or 45 minutes, and then we have one more 2-hour session that's not economics.
Correct.
So, you guys, I think you choose how you want to proceed on this.
I would like to suggest making a subcommittee. I don't feel like we can decide this issue without our specialists or our traveling teachers and come to a solution that would represent them. I think we need to have their voice heard.
In terms of, we always like to have subcommittees that have folks that are at this table also, right? So we probably need to have a couple of people from this table. I'm assuming Pam would serve as a support resource for that committee. But then we probably should have 2 people from this team.
I can volunteer.
Anybody else? Why do I look at you? Because you seem to be semi-subject matter expert. Anyone else?
For
You're
elementary
shaking your
school.
head.
Who is most deeply involved? Like,
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering.
Well, I think it comes down to also that when we look at our special schedule or our traveling specials, they always work with Chris Lowe or Christy Darby, their directors, to work out what that schedule looks like between buildings. Principals actually work really well together on it, but if they need to problem solve, they work with their directors on that. Chris supports a lot of that, I know.
I'm happy to volunteer Chris, because Christy already gets to serve on this team.
I get to serve on this.
Yeah, I mean, when I think about committees, I think about, we don't want it to be heavy admin and not
Well,
heavy
yeah.
bargaining unit. We also think about who are the folks that have knowledge in their head that really bring something. And then, we think about representation throughout. So I don't know if you guys are going to look mostly, it feels like you talk a lot about elementary. Are you elementary level? And you are too? Does it make sense to have somebody else in the room that's not elementary level? Jill seems to have a view of sort of all. If we can't go more than 8 or you're not productive.
And I think it's important that we have a specialist, somebody whose
Yeah,
feet on the
assuming-
ground is
assuming we would have-
actually doing that,
Maybe the coordinators.
maybe the
They're
coordinators.
willing.
Megan will do it.
Megan is jumping for joy. And just know that, I mean, can we say the committee should have the flexibility to pull in those folks that have the information you need to do your job? And the job is, I believe, it's come back for a recommendation around the issues raised around workload in the PowerPoint presentation.
And I would
And then-
recommend, I mean, I don't know who said they would do it, I didn't turn around, but I would recommend that if we have teacher representation, that it's a teacher that actually travels to schools.
Yeah, I think that.
Right, sorry, I didn't hear who said they were, because I can't turn around.
Okay, so who has a list? Who typed a list?
So
Amber,
we've
did you
got-
start a list? Did you type somebody?
Pam, Amber, Chris Lowe, and then
Megan Ellis
Megan Ellis.
and Anna Featherston.
Okay.
Pam, do we have a principal that we could ask who is?
I'm confused right now.
Do we have a principal we could ask who has us, who will always have,
Traveling?
traveling?
So someone from Lenexa Hills. I don't know.
Yeah,
I
somebody
just know
gave
they're
me
small.
They're
No?
actually
Okay.
nominally.
Sorry.
So you're wanting are you asking me for a principal that usually has a schedule where their staff supports?
Yes, and I'm just suggesting.
No, yep, that can probably be, well, Christy Pernell is part of that, but if we want somebody else at the table, she's like, don't say my
This is
name.
an opportunity.
I'm already on. so-
Yeah, we can do Crystal Liker at Santa Fe Trail because they're a smaller
Yeah.
building, has always had that schedule split. And I know one of the questions that was asked was typical number of sections that they support. That's anywhere from typically, I'm going to say last year was an anomaly because it was. Typically, it's 1 to 4. 4 is the most, and those schools that have, the school that has 4 has 14 sections in the building.
Okay. And then we meet again on the 25th, and today is the 8th. So could that committee get together a couple times before then and come back?
I
with-
wouldn't think it would take more than 1 or 2. I just
Yeah.
think that this kind of conversation needs to be like a back forth, not
Focus.
sitting formally in front of microphones, like problem solving, roll up your sleeves kind of thing.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't think it would take an immense number of hours, especially because this team has gone through this, I think, 1 or 2 prior years.
But specific recommendations would be good, knowing that this group will then, consider those heavily. So specific recommendations would be good. You guys agree?
Agreed.
Yep.
You'd like to see something perhaps actionable or specific. If you find that there's a need not to do actionable or specific, then share them with us why. I mean, the good news, it sounds like, Pam, you're saying next semester or next year is going to look different. Don't know if it always will look different, but I don't think you guys want to leave it to chance.
It typically has.
Okay.
Last year, like I said, was definitely a different
Yeah.
challenge for us to work through.
Yeah,
No
it sounds
doubt
like
about
people
it.
felt.
I have one more question.
And I do want to say to that, our teachers that did have the added sections and did have to support did a phenomenal job.
Yeah, nice.
The issue of plan time and increments, is that a scheduling issue for anyone other than traveling teachers?
I'm not aware of it, and I think this year was the problem, the struggle year. I think there's one school in mind that comes to mind. I don't know that it was multiple buildings. But again, I don't want to,
I'm just, again,
Only
trying to make sure
generalize.
that we're all educated about if we change something here,
Yeah.
we don't create a problem somewhere else. So, is this, I don't know historically why we had that increment put in. I don't know if it was directed at these traveling teachers or if it was why it was put in there. But if there's any discussion in this committee of that piece, I think we need to know if it's only them that it's
I know from
impacting.
being a principal, it was that it had to be 20 minutes or more so that it was meaningful time.
Yes.
Right? You couldn't say, well, you have 15 minutes in your schedule here that can count as plan time because the teacher's not going to be able to, be able to sit down and actually plan during that. So I know that's why it was the 20 minutes or more.
And I know I think naturally classroom teachers, because of specials, that's not going to be ever a problem. The only potential areas I could see it being a problem is for sped teachers. I think there would be the more flexibility there. Kind of the same with plan shouldn't be until student contact.
Got it.
So kind of that same.
Okay.
Pam, the information that you have, Pam is privy to as well? So you don't have, okay. Because I was going to ask, if not, could you share with Rachel and Amber what you're looking at? I'm sharing my notes from your conversation last time, and if Jill can share Rachel and Amber, your PowerPoint, Jill, they could forward to the folks on that committee. So if they want to look back on anything you guys have said or done or heard or been presented, they'll have that information. I'm sending these notes now. So again, Rachel and Amber, you guys could forward them on.
Did you take notes on who volunteered, Rachel?
I have a tentative
Pam,
list.
Amber, Chris Lowe, who doesn't know yet.
Right.
Megan Ellis, Crystal
Yep.
Liker, who doesn't know yet.
Yep.
So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Is that 3 and 3? Or
Can
do
we-
do we need one? Amber.
I have an Anna Featherston or a Kim Bogart also on my list.
I mean, you guys please pick, but whoever makes sense that will come with the right perspectives.
I think you got a lot of people going, me? Obviously passionate about the issue. Okay, so folks, it is 4:38. Do people need 10 minutes? When we come back, do you want to go ahead and look at the sped workload, which I think starts with maybe a review of the MOU, which somebody here said they can pull up?
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
so
Okay.
10
That'd be
minutes,
great.
okay?
That sounds good.
So come back at a little before 10 till, no later than 10 till. How about that?
easy, I'm not worried about that one.
I have McLean Bakery cookies on the corner. You can take off my hands, anyone.
I did squats last night and my
Take
body
and pass.
hurts.
The issue of sped workload, I've asked Christy to share the MOU. And you've got it on the screen, look at that. And so if folks can kind of sort of take a glance, you all put this together 2022 or 2021?
So it's for the 23-24 school year.
So you did, okay, and you did it last year, you did it in 2022, I think, and renewed it.
Correct.
Once, okay.
Last year's
Yeah.
the first year, so.
Yeah, this is maybe the second renewal. So folks, I guess it's just a review, because I don't think there's a brand-new issue statement. It's review, what's working, what's not. Is there anything that now becomes permanent, anything that comes out, anything that's dated? So you can look at it on your own screen and/or on the screen on the wall, and then let's just start having conversation about it. Was there a heading on this that gave like a subheading? Compensation for full-time secondary teachers?
Isn't this issue number 5 now for us?
And regarding work assignments for special ed teachers, yeah.
You want me to just go to the part where it talks about special?
I think so. We don't have to revisit middle school hours, do we?
I hope not.
It's the three A and B, really all of it memorialized. Since we've had the MOU for 3 years, third year now.
So there's A. Can you scroll up to B? If people are ready? I don't want to go into your drive, so I can see. As the 4 paperwork days, was that also 2022 school year and it carried over to this? Or was this the first year you guys did that?
No.
No, it's been
It
2
carried
or
over,
3
so you've done it
years.
2 school years? Are those monthly meetings happening?
I believe so.
They're awesome.
It's the one that happens on the second Tuesday.
Oh, yeah, no, those are definitely happening. Sorry, I was lost for a second. Yeah, those are definitely occurring, 100%. Yep.
Here or back there? Yeah.
Oh, you can sit right here.
Thank you for joining, Sherry.
Are we going to have a speaker on it today? You guys?
I think she's here if we have questions, right?
Okay.
She didn't, do you have a presentation?
I do not.
I think
Okay.
she's just
Didn't
here
know,
for,
didn't know,
if
just
we had
available.
questions.
Oops.
Yes, that's what we had agreed upon.
What is the title of that? Can you scroll up to the top?
It was a middle school title.
Okay.
So I think it's
It's
what's,
in our folder from last year.
so what's working, what's not, what changes, what actions need to be done from here?
I think that the teachers enjoy having the paperwork days. I feel like that's really helped a lot of teachers to get the paperwork done that needs to be done. I just think some additional things that I've heard them ask is if they could have people here to help them with the paperwork, or like a mentor to help them with the paperwork if they were a newer employee to the district, to like really understand the Skyward system. So that would just be something I would ask for in addition, like that if they needed someone to just support them through the paperwork, that person could be here on the day of their sped paperwork day. And just also ensuring that they do get those days, like they're not, sometimes it's being said that there's not a sub available, so they're not able to use the day when they would like to use it.
Can I respond to
Absolutely.
both
Sure.
of those things?
Absolutely.
So the first piece, the first piece is we have arranged, so if an individual reaches out to, whether it's a special education coordinator, whether it is school psychologist, special ed instructional coach. We have had individuals available to partner with staff as they navigate paperwork on those days. Now, it doesn't, if they reach out the day of in 30 minutes and want them there, that's not necessarily a guarantee, right? But I do know that many instances we have had that occur, and it's been time well spent. The second part of your component about if there isn't a sub, I do think it's important, and I have answered this question a couple of times, and it is on our special education hub, that paperwork day, it is clear that it has to be mutually agreed upon time from the building principal in addition to the special education provider, because we don't know if, I don't know, maybe you had a field trip for a couple of grade levels and you had a whole bunch of people out of the building. And so I think where we have found ourselves in a predicament a couple of times this school year is individuals have wanted to use it. Maybe hypothetically, they have an IEP that is due on Thursday. They want to use a paperwork day Wednesday, but maybe Wednesday there are already 8 to 10 subs in the building and there isn't sub coverage available, which then creates, I think, like a kind of a cog in the system. But I don't know that we can get away from a mutually agreed upon day because there are so many layers of building needs and coverage and things of that nature. So I did want to indicate that.
Kind of a follow-up on that. My concern is if that was already placed, the special education teacher had already planned for the day, written those lesson plans, and then because of that line, it gets canceled.
Well, I would agree with you is that if it were already mutually agreed upon, to me, it should stick.
Okay.
Right? Like I'm saying in the instances where the special education teacher or provider reached out the day before or the morning of and wanting to enact a paperwork day, that may not be
I see what
able
you're
to
saying.
happen.
So as long as it's planned out,
Absolutely.
it should, and they've reached out already, said, hey, this day is approved.
Yes.
Even if something were to come up last minute and there would be a lot of subs in the building, it would not be canceled.
It shouldn't be.
Okay.
Yeah. I will also, this may not be the right forum for this, but I will, because there could be people watching, I want to just put it out there. We have maybe gleaned, we really want to make sure that people are using those paperwork days for what they're intended to be used for. We have heard some rumblings of potential misuse of those days, and we see the value in those days, and so I would really hate to have to really hone in. And when I say misuse, I've heard of things of maybe going to doctor's appointments and calling it a paperwork day, or maybe doing schoolwork from courses and calling it a paperwork day, and they're working on coursework as opposed to IEP paperwork or programming for particular students.
So then what's kind of on that, what's the physical location of where they're completing their paperwork days at?
So that's a great, so that may be, you have two options essentially. The option one, which is the one that we strongly recommend, is that we have a room reserved here at CAA where people can be uninterrupted from their building, because we understand how walkie calls happen or text messages happen. So that is our recommended location. However, I also know that sometimes it's just easier, you have all of your stuff in your building, so their building would be the next location. It has to be, our stance has been that it had to be, it can't be at Starbucks, right? It has to be on district property.
I like to do them at the building so that I can get a hold of the school psych if I have questions over paperwork. Also, if I know my paperwork day's coming up, I try to schedule like 30 minutes or so with them so that those questions can be answered.
So then that, again, I know there's always going to be people who take advantage of the system, but as long as they're on school grounds, then that eliminates at least the doctor's appointment concern.
It does.
Unless it's with priority one, because there are exceptions that they can come to priority one.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it is just, again, wanting to, we see the value as, and
For
want
sure.
to be able to continue, but we also have to be able to honor all.
Oh, yeah.
So.
Sherry, what's the cost of those 4 paperwork days?
Oh, a lot, but can I? It's a lot, and it's something that we have the last 2 years. If you recall, this originated out of ESSER dollars. I carried this into our department budget last year, and we have budgeted for that again this next school year in my budget proposal. And so I can get those numbers. I just don't have them right off the bat.
When you talk about, the possibility of people taking advantage of those days, obviously that financial component of that as well, I think needs to be considered, so.
I do anticipate that this coming up in further conversation, but I'll just go ahead and put it here because it ties to paperwork days. So where we have found teams being stretched for unpredictable circumstances, right, to where maybe we had an unexpected vacancy occur, or maybe we had a high volume of unexpected move-ins. And again, it's a variance depending on the unique needs of those departments. We have honored additional paperwork time for folks to be able to offset some of that additional burden that has come in. We are tracking utilization of paperwork days better this year than we have in the past. And so if you want those specifics as to individuals who received more, or I can pull that breakdown. I don't have that breakdown today, though.
I was going to ask for that and see.
Yeah,
if people
it was my
actually-
next thought process too, sorry.
How many people are using them? Is every teacher using them? Because that would, of course, play into the cost if not every teacher is using it.
So I do think the tricky piece to that is twofold, right? The cost accrued is going to be costs associated with a Kelly sub. So we do have some positions that are still granted paperwork days, like our related service providers, school psychologists, who there is not a Kelly sub equivalent to. So those individuals are afforded the opportunity, but the budgeting for them obviously factors in very differently, right? So.
And social workers, are they included in paperwork days as of right now? Okay.
But SLPs, right, they don't get subs.
Yes.
So that would
Okay.
also not be in the budget.
Are we having a lot of people who are misusing, or is that a small number comparatively to staff that we have? I know that's probably hard to speak on, I'm sorry.
It's okay. We did a disclaimer last year when we drilled down at the start, I guess it was at the start of the school year, to where we had identified some individuals who had used 10 to 12 paperwork days in isolation without approval. So we did err on the side of trying to do kind of a mass form of communication when we had everybody together in August of, hey, this isn't something that we want to go away, so we want to be mindful and those types of things. Again, I would prefer to drill down and get you more actual information than just to speak in generalities.
So we've seen issues not in two ways. One, those days not being used for their intended purpose, but also more than 4 without approval. Is it possible, are there times where it is appropriate for the ask for an additional day and it happens? Or is it supposed to be 4 across the board?
The intent is 4 across the board, right? Because when the intent was hearing a lot from special education staff in two methods, right? It was either being interrupted as they were trying to sit down to do paperwork was one piece, or the other piece was progress reports feel very overwhelming, and it's an additional, it's a requirement, but it's something that can feel cumbersome. And so the rationale for 4 was it would afford an individual an opportunity for 1 per quarter if they wanted to do, their progress reports are required quarterly based on regulation. And so that was one method that individuals could choose to use those days, or they could use it the other way in regards to, and we don't script out the utilization because they're a professional entity and we want them to decide what that should look like. But if they had a heavy IEP month in October, maybe they would want to utilize an IEP paperwork day in October, as opposed to maybe in January they don't have any IEPs due. Right? So we've tried to leave it to a level of professional discretion as they navigate through some of those pieces. But we've also had some unique circumstances that we've altered, going back to year 4, right, where we had a staff member unexpectedly on FMLA, which a team then absorbed additional paperwork that wasn't part of the scope of the plan, but we wanted to offset that additional burden by creating uninterrupted time for that absorption, if you will. One piece that hasn't been discussed, but I'm just going to go ahead and plant it, is that the other intent was to also, one of the pieces that we heard from staff was that if I had guaranteed time, you would see less errors and in my reporting, because I could be able to access the paperwork and the material uninterrupted. I don't know that we've seen a decrease in those errors yet, but to be fair, we've also, this has been our first full year of what I would say more thorough implementation of professional development as it relates to those types of things. And so I don't know that I think we've got to give that PD time and opportunity to kind of kick in, if that makes sense.
So I'm going to talk about it because I love them. Thank you. Like I've got, I think it's 7 or 8 IEPs between the beginning of January to the end of February. So that's a lot of paperwork. And each one takes anywhere between an hour and a half to 3 hours, depending on how just services and the kiddo and the case and all that jazz. And then progress reports are not additional, they come with the job. But progress reports take a lot of time because you've got to go find all the data. And if you're not compiling it appropriately, you've got to do all that jazz. I would say that, one, I would love to keep these. They're amazing, and for those of us that are utilizing them appropriately, which I would hope would be a large number of us, we would just really like to see that within our written language for our P&A as opposed to just continuing it as an MOU. So I like them and I want to keep them. And it makes my job easier. Not easier, but better.
So I'm thinking, another question, early to the career SPED staff, what supports are available to them, or are they more encouraged to have supports available to them on these paperwork days to try to limit mistakes within the paperwork?
I want to add the disclaimer first, and then I'll answer that question.
Yes.
We see errors, whether it's an individual it's their first year in special education to their lots of years.
Well, yeah, of
in
course,
education, right? So it's not, we haven't been able to narrow it to, because we're looking at that data to try to figure this out. But however, I would say level of support is that we encourage, we don't mandate, we encourage them to consider inviting the instructional coach who supports their building. I do know that many instances I've seen them partnering together and that taking place. But again, it's not, we haven't made that a requirement of individuals. We've just strongly encouraged it.
Right.
And I'll do a shameless plug. We have 1 million guidance documents on our special education hub that literally can walk you through step by step. So again,
Perfect.
if you, depending on the type of learner that you are,
Right.
that's something that we try to incorporate in. And we've also embedded some video-based ones,
Awesome.
which is new. So,
Good.
yeah.
Yeah, perfect.
Also, I wanted to mention as well, we're talking about retention. I would think having those paper days would help with helping out with avoiding burnout.
Yeah.
Because they have, that extra time for support.
Thank you.
Yes. Yes. As of right now, it's part of the MOU.
But you're talking about
I would like it.
move all of it or the 4 days?
Personally, yeah, all of it. But at least the 4 days.
What do
we
people
can
feel
do
like,
that.
how are people feeling about that?
I'm trying to remember history.
I'm trying to look up history too.
I mean, the first thought I have too, I was having this thought earlier and I just wanted to be captured real quick before I forget it. I know you were talking a little bit about some staff need additional, that they can request additional. So if we do put those 4 days into the P&A, some type of language that also says additional can be requested as needed. So just want to throw that out there before I forget it. I know that's a solution.
So this is bifurcated into two issues. One, compensation for secondary teachers assigned to teach 6. We've not,
Isn't that already in?
that we did.
Yeah.
Okay, I was like,
That's
that's already
what
in
my
there.
question was. I was trying to
Yeah.
remember history. I thought we hard coded that last
Yeah,
year.
we already did that, yep, so it would just.
So this is just the
The
paperwork
paperwork
days.
days.
And of course, if we are looking at that as a solution, we probably need to go through and talk about interest there.
Right, and so when I'm looking at the 5-step document for special education plan time, I don't have it, so that means you all took notes in the body of an issue statement, and it would have been last year or perhaps the year before.
I know that this is my first opportunity to come to the table here this year, but I would prefer to go back and get some more specific data as it relates to this particular topic, for us to have some more dialogue around before we, for lack of better word, somebody used the term hard code or hard,
Yes.
whatever that looks like, right? Again, this is something that we are planning on implementing next school year, but I also, I would really like to be able to look at the data and have some discussion before we,
So this is the second school year we've done paperwork days? Okay.
Yes, it's the second school year.
And
What-
again, this is not, my understanding is that this is not something that other school districts do. It's sort of a.
Other school
They,
districts
they
do.
absolutely have paperwork days for their sped people, yes.
KCK, I think.
KCK does, yeah.
KCK does.
Olathe does not, Blue Valley.
I was going to say
Gardner
that.
does.
And Gardner does.
And I
Okay.
think it's important to note, like, I know all of the SPED staff are so grateful that it's there right now, but that doesn't mean when you're no longer here that they will still be here. So that's kind of where that's going.
Do you know something that I don't
No,
know?
I do not. I'm
I was just
thinking
wondering.
way, no, don't worry.
If you decide to
Right.
run your horizons.
Way down the road, not in the near future, but later on is where I'm going with that.
No, and I totally understand that there, I mean, what we are talking about here is the push and pull between putting things into the P&A and not, right? And again, the nervousness that the individuals representing the board have here is that when it is in, it is never coming out. And that is a reality, right? That's just the reality, right? Is that if it's there, it's essentially there forever, absent some insane financial hardship or something, and probably without going through impasse. So that's our concern, is that before we hard code something, it's like, are we really ready to do this? Do we have the data? Do we have the support? Are we sure it's working? And then, of course, I completely understand, and I am hearing from the association side that it's a level of, we want to make sure that something that's benefited us is a guarantee and is not going to be pulled away because I'm making decisions on where I sign a contract for next year based on what these things are, you know, what our P&A says. So that's just sort of the push and pull.
What kind of data do you think that folks would want to look at to see the question of, is it effective in a way that you'd want to make it permanent? What data were you thinking when you mentioned data?
So I think of a few data sets. One data set being the number of days utilized from individuals, in addition to the number of days being used, also probably the scope in terms of over the year. Like, I do know that we have some individuals that do heavy days in the spring versus versus spread out. Another piece would be the analysis and the correlation between individuals utilizing their paperwork days and errors and corrections that are needed or non-response to corrections needed to the paperwork that would be occurring. And that's all data that we would be able to to pull.
Anything else people would want to see? I'm just typing the list that I can email out.
What would be the time frame that would be possible for that? I mean, is it just the last year that you could look at that? Do you have an ability to look at 2 years?
I'll try to look at 2 years.
Okay.
I do know, in full disclosure, year one, it was so new that I don't know how thorough our data.
Yeah.
We also had some difficulty when it came to the reporting, the request in frontline, and we have a different drop down for that now that wasn't there before. You know what I mean? So I can for sure get a year. I'm not confident in year one data and the accuracy of that. I also think it's important to notate that there's going to be a level of change just given staffing changes, whether it's because we've added staff because of increased in identification of special education students. So that it's not going to, I just think it's important to notate it's not comparing apples to apples, right? It's not saying that we had the same number of staffing allotment that would utilize these paperwork days year one that we did year two, because it's going to be different.
Okay.
Prior to the 4 paperwork days, was there paperwork that was just not getting done? Or is that just not a possibility? It was getting done, but it was getting done at teachers' homes and...
We still have that as a problem where we have paperwork that just isn't getting done. And so this didn't eliminate that from happening. But I would say what we believe was happening more, it was a higher volume of paperwork happening that staff were doing in their evenings at home away from their families. And
Yeah, I asked that because I remember the issue statement was really about that, and I'm concerned that the correlation between paperwork days and errors, I don't think it was a goal. It's certainly a benefit, and it would really probably be a great argument onto why you'd want to make these permanent. But how could you measure for, is just more paperwork being done in a timely manner?
I think
Which is, I think, why you all did this.
I think it was a combination, though,
Okay.
because what people were saying were that the rate of errors that were happening was because of their lack of time
got it.
of being able to have dedicated time and uninterrupted time for
I see.
paperwork. At least that was part of what I had
Yeah.
gleaned from what people were sharing.
Okay.
I think it comes down to really work-life balance. That's the major issue
Yeah, I
here.
just was saying, how do you measure, is that effective?
And so I don't know if, I mean, I think that we need the data. Don't get this next statement saying that we don't need the data. But I'm just afraid that the work-life balance isn't going to show up on that data. And that's where I think a lot of the root of this issue on NEA-Shawnee missions side is coming from.
Well, I think the question is, does this solution that we came up with meet all the interests? And there are clearly interests for our SPED professional employees, which are work-life balance, and there are also interests on the administration side, which may be more easily measured.
So,
But
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I just don't want it to
think we need
get lost in the data that our but our issue is more of a work-life balance, which is harder to measure with data. So I just don't want that to get lost
Sure.
when we're looking at all the data.
Right, and so the question is, like, is this solution solving the problem we identified and meeting most interest and certainly not harming any? And I think for us to know what data you want to look at, we need to see who took those notes on the 5 steps. Was the issue statement work-life balance for SPED teachers, or was the issue statement, I don't have it. I've looked in.
It was, I mean, it really came out of looking at how we define workload for SPED teachers. And what we talked about was that is caseload assignment and the severity of the needs of the students who are on their caseloads. That is, it can vary very differently from teacher to teacher, from SPED teacher to SPED teacher, and the discussion came out of yeah.
I think, again, I wasn't part of all of these conversations in the past, but I think, and I would have to go back and look, I think that part of this came from a response to, during COVID, our staff, 2 pieces. One, they had to rewrite a level of paperwork for every student on their caseload multiple times because of requirements continuing to change. And so post that, pandemic time, if you will, our staff were having to do so much duplicative paperwork that we had put into place as a department, this as a reprieve to what we were seeing from staff. And then that spring, when IBB was meeting,
Okay, got
it
it.
was discussed as how could we continue, because at that point in time, it was all being
Yes.
covered out of ESSER dollars. So this issue statement, or
Yeah,
I'm sorry,
it's an
I'm
issue. Yeah.
using some new
Yeah.
language.
Yeah, that's okay.
Was not, I don't believe it originated here as your other ones typically
Yep.
have. I think it was a response to something our department put into place as a measure to support staff.
Yep.
And then was
Adopted
immersed.
into a part. I think
Yeah.
I'm finding it. I think
Yeah.
tell me if this sounds right. How do we address teacher burnout and create better work-life balances? The notes were things like this. Plan time is taken for IEPs. Counselors concerned about workload. Counselors not doing deep dives. SPED, no limit on the number of preps. More students on a SPED caseload is more of everything, including paperwork. IEPs sometimes written at home on own time. IEP meetings after school. Taking on a supervision, what does that mean? Elementary specials, harder in large buildings. And then I think you guys got into the interest, and then part of your possible solutions, I think that was pulled in as part of a possible solution.
See, guys, I had already solved it.
Yeah, you did, you did.
I just, no, I'm just.
ESSER's money was listed here with lots of different impacts. Sherry, you gave us a presentation back then.
I have in our notes from last year ballpark costs.
Yep.
Again, given this was last year, I'm sure things are different, but 144,000. Yeah, inflation, exactly.
In the SPED work study, was that during COVID? Somehow you gave us a report that Sherry's convening a SPED work study.
Oh, I very well probably did. I would have to go back and look at.
Well, somehow all of that morphed into this, and probably much more than we have on here. So here are the interests. I don't know that we have to decide this tonight. What I'm reading it for is there more information people want to look at to see did it solve a problem here and meet interest. One interest is retaining educators, avoid burnout. Post-high school student outcomes be the best possible. I don't know if that's related to SPED. Students getting better, more individualized support for better outcomes, well-being of staff, healthy employees, ability to do their job successfully. Happier employees equal better outcomes for students, and equity to improve climate in buildings. Those were the interests that were here. It doesn't mean that you guys don't have other notes when you dug deeper on SPED. But yeah, I think that if we're true to the process, does this fix a problem, doesn't meet interest without harming any, and to do it objectively, you would have to look at data. Understandably, some things related to work-life balance can't be gathered without a heavy lift. So from here, you guys, we're past 12:15. What do you want to do? I made a list of 4 things that you guys suggested. I think, Sherry, you suggested 3, maybe I added another one. Do I send that to someone? You guys try to pull it at some point, or how do you want to go forward on this?
You mean in terms of looking at data?
Yeah, I was gonna say.
I feel like, and I think this is okay, I feel like this is an issue, and tell me if I'm totally off base here, but this feels like a traditional ask, and that's okay. We might have some issues that come to the table that's like, this isn't really an IBB, we're just asking for this. And so, is this really an issue of we're making a traditional ask to memorialize this MOU that's been in place for 2 years into the P&A, and then the question is, does the administration feel like we're ready for that we can support that the board will accept it? Because if that's where we are, then it may be that it's just some time in study and we need to come back and talk about that again. Or are we at a place where we need to break everything down and
really
re-IBB it again?
Test it against the
This is
problem.
something that we've already gone through the IBB process, came up with this solution, which has been this MOU, because it's a new program. It's new for Shawnee Mission, at least. Clearly not completely novel, as I thought, but it's new for Shawnee Mission. And we wanted time to test and feel and see if it was sustainable, I guess, and beneficial. So I don't know. I guess that's my question. Is this just more of a traditional hey, we want to talk about incorporating this, or are we trying to like really break down, starting from the beginning of the IBB process, sped workload issues, in which case, if we're going to do that from a timing perspective, we do not have enough meeting time left.
I mean, we can always add meeting time. There's nothing that says that we have to be done. So if we do want to go through that, I know I'm ready to add meeting time.
I cannot add meeting time.
Well, I mean, a couple things. You know, it feels as though there's always going to be a desire for the things that are coming out to be good, want to be permanent in the contract.
Yes.
There's always a desire for that. The
Yes.
question then becomes, are you just going to ask and get a yes/no answer, or do you want to keep trying to collaborate together on whether or not it should go in the contract? Recognizing that an interest of the association is ensuring this benefit is there if the people change, right? The fear is that if Sherry's face isn't here, Rachel's, if the board, other people, which is sort of an issue statement of its own, and I know you guys hate to hear that from me. But do you lose anything by looking at number of days used, when days are being used, correlation between paperwork days and errors? You recognize there's still PD to be had to really impact that, I think.
And this is the first year that we've really had that dedicated professional development time to fully be able to implement.
So that you would see those errors go down. And then, but I would say there's no way to measure, but can you get specific feedback from teachers? Teacher, has it impacted them in a positive way? We've just heard from sort of one special ed teacher.
I do
and then bring all that
occasionally
back.
get messages from individuals on a paperwork day thanking us for the paperwork days, so, yeah.
And then at least you answer the question, is this solving the problem we're trying to solve? You know, and if the answer is yes, would there be, then do you need to move on to process, how do we ensure permanency, or is it just a no-brainer to make it permanent? And then I know there is the question then, if there's a cost to it, then there's the question of budget, a permanent budget item. Right? So I would recommend, if I could recommend it, you don't lose anything by getting this information.
Absolutely not.
And it's not like if you don't figure out how to make it go in the contract in the next 2 sessions, you're going to lose this MOU, but you do have to figure out if you're going to renew it and what parts of it.
Right.
So we do need to revisit it again.
Absolutely.
Before we're done.
Well, and I just, along with like the analysis and the correlation between the paperwork days and errors, can we do like a positive spin on it and do correlation between paperwork days and like, yay, no errors? Because.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, please.
You may find a correlation between attendance, quite frankly.
That too.
I'm going to send this, Rachel, the list of the 4 things that you guys might look at, I'm sending to you and to Amber.
Sherry, I know you're not available at our next meeting. What about if we have 10 more hours of meetings after that?
After the next one, right. We have 2 more hours and then 10. 2, 5, and 5, right?
Yes.
What about at that first compensation meeting?
That'd be May 15th.
Yep.
I'm looking at my calendar, sorry.
This is just a what-if question, but what if they fully funded special education? Would this be a problem?
Say again, Amber?
If they fully funded special education, would this be a problem?
The state.
There'd be money for you, money for you, money for that day.
I mean, amen, but also, we always have we always have sped openings that we can't fill. I mean, I think that's.
And while we've seen a significant reduction in our vacancies, I mean, I don't have those numbers in front of me, but we have seen a significant reduction in the number of vacancies that we have each year. But there is still, and I do even have a tentative, and I'm happy to share this piece of information, but when it was a late resignation versus if it was due to kind of what the circumstance were, right, for the vacancy, right? Because again, we are really working to try to build in some of these pieces to help with retention aspects, in addition to, as you have heard or experienced, grow your own opportunities, right, to where we are investing within individuals within our system to help kind of replenish. Our number of special education students continues to rise, and so our need for qualified staff also is continuing to be necessary as well.
So can I say, Rachel and Amber, take a look at the information that you guys may want to dig up and see how we can put it back on the agenda before we're done with bargaining this year. And I'm going to also say, guys, be patient with the process. if you look back at what you've done the past 3, maybe 4 bargaining cycles in terms of what you've accomplished together, it's worth being diligent and being patient and following the process. It really is. I hate for you guys to set yourself up to just, ask yes or no of each other. Asking yes or no of each other is going to take you backwards.
Well, and I feel like the data that we're going to look at is going to be.
That'll fill out.
Because
yeah,
to
fill
me,
it out
it's
for
not
you.
just a traditional ask. It is, if it's working and it's meeting our interests, yes, we need to add it. Even though, yes, that is, yes, forever and ever until.
And we have a history of doing
Right.
that. Of, for example, we make, this is a turn a little bit for SPED. We've turned a little bit on late resignation. We've come back and look at data. So, sometimes I think it's okay just to be frank and say, yeah, that's,
I mean, that's what I want. But again, I'm okay with sitting back, looking at the data and actually going through the IBB process.
I mean,
with this,
truthfully,
because I
the
do
data
think it's
usually
helpful.
pans out that the parties do the right thing,
Absolutely.
right? And sometimes the right thing is what everyone was hoping for, and sometimes it's not, but it yet generally turns out to be the right thing,
Right.
So we'll go from there.
okay.
Awesome.
It may be tomorrow afternoon before I send out a joint statement. I am feeling under the weather. I have meetings tomorrow morning, but I'll get it out. So don't feel like you have to wake up and look at it. It might be tomorrow afternoon before I put a joint statement together, but we'll get that out. I'll send you my homework on a second stab at a draft TA for the late resignation provision. And then we will have that subcommittee on specials work, and then hopefully come back at our next meeting.
Start with that on the 25th.
Yeah.
And then confirm the calendar stuff, which sounds like it's already
Yes,
built
I
in.
need to do homework on that too. Again, I just don't have any grasp of that issue.
Does it make, do you have a format of your joint statement that anybody can just do a joint statement and take that off your plate, Rachel? I don't know. Is it kind of a format that you fill in the blanks on what you've accomplished?
I mean, what I do, my process is I take notes the entire time, and then I sit back and think about what a summary is. And I try and write it, I was a journalist in college, so I try and write it in a newspaper reporting style. I try to kind of, I'm happy to.
Overachiever, it's hard
I
to
know.
delegate your.
I'm happy to keep doing it. It's just, it's,
I'm just
every
saying-
time I'm like, this will be 2 paragraphs, and then I write 7, and I'm like, well, no, I don't know.
Well, it could probably be something that someone here can pick up. I mean, it's not good for one person to always be the only person that seems to have that responsibility. And if you're not feeling great and you're tight on time and you've already got other responsibilities, if someone wants to volunteer to do a joint statement.
Can I make a suggestion?
Yep.
And Amber, I'm sorry, I'm not going to try to volunteer you
Hey,
for
we're all looking at
anything.
Amber. Why are we doing it?
But I think there could be benefit that both lead negotiators have access to the document beforehand.
You guys have access to it right now.
Oh,
I
okay.
create, so I literally copy the one from the one before, and I start typing
So it's a-
notes.
Oh, I did not
It
know
is a
that.
template,
While we're
yeah.
in this, so everyone has access to it from
Right.
initiation to whatever,
Because I don't think all of us should be typing on there because I
Yeah,
think it gets
it's really
messy.
messy.
But I think if Amber can type on, again, I'm sorry,
Use the
Amber, I don't want to
template,
volunteer
give me
you
updates
for
tonight.
anything, but I do think there's benefit to allowing Amber to
It's-
type on there as well.
It's difficult because tomorrow I don't have schedule flexibility, but I'm not standing in front of students. Amber's teaching the next day as we're finishing up. So, but yeah, any support that anyone can provide, absolutely, you have edit access from right now. So,
Or your update could be watch the video.
yes, I know. Yeah.
Is there anything else?
No? Okay. Thanks,
cool.
guys.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.